Hey everybody, thanks for joining us. Today we're going to be looking at a use case leveraging Spatial AI's data set, geosocial data, specifically customer segmentation data. And we have with us today Leiden Faust, CEO of Spatial AI. How's it going, Leiden?
Going pretty well, Jorge.
Well, great. Why don't we start off by talking about Spatial AI's data set and let our viewers know what we're going to be talking about here today.
Yeah, sure. So geosocial was created based off the insight that there's billions of people talking about their mindsets, interests, and attitudes on social media. And there was no company that was capturing that at a geographic level. So that's what we do. We pull from Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Flickr, multiple different social media sources, organize that into a list of 72 segments like nightlife, um, connected motherhood, party life, green thumb. So we can show what types of lifestyles based on social media and actual behaviors in what location.
Exactly. And the beauty of what we're going to show you today is taking that data set and combining it with mobile location data to show not just the visualization, but show where customers are, what they're talking about, how they're behaving, and what their interests are. So this use case is going to be specifically about this region over here. So talking about Connecticut, Pennsylvania, Jersey, New York, Philly, and we're going to really dive into these regions and see where would Firehouse subs consider opening a new or next location based off of customer segmentation data provided by Spatial AI. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look actually at these two locations right here. So we've got this location that's showing a $947,000 revenue stream, and we have mobile location data turned on for that to show the pathing data. So how customers are going to that location and then leaving that location. We're actually picking up 2 hours prior and 2 hours after. So we're showing all of these little trails, and we're going to evaluate that site against this other site here in Allentown, Pennsylvania. This one's making 8% above average at $689,000. And so these two locations have mobile turned on, and we can see there's a nice overlap here. Now, just to help with this visualization, to put things into context, we're going to go ahead and adjust the time, the hours of operation to evaluate this, which Firehouse Subs is typically open around, I believe, actually 10:30 all the way through 7 p.m. So let's go ahead and adjust that and quickly hit refresh. This is looking at, from the moment that we've activated this data, we're looking at 365 days worth of data to show the overlap and see what this looks like across the market. So just based off of that, the data has cleaned itself up a little bit. We're seeing a little bit less pathing or trips or pings with the mobile location data. So this is something to see already right here alone, but the beauty is how we've taken this and combined it with customer seg data. And that's what we're going to look at right now. So how does the mobile location data and the customer segmentation data that Spatial AI has provided, how do they play together? So Leiden, before we dive into exactly what we're seeing here on the right in this dashboard, let's talk about Spatial AI and how we're treating customer segments and rankings across the US with social network, keywords and hashtags, et cetera.
Yeah, so the way our data is organized is we scored 0 to 100, and that's the predominance of that type of activity in a block group. And so anything above 50 is pretty high, anything below 50 is lower. What I'm seeing here in this site, you have party life ranking high, ingredient attentive, men's style, networking. So men's style tells me that there's a fair amount of retail going on around there. It's an active area. Networking, there's some business lunches going on around here. Ingredient attentive, these people are a little bit more focused on the types of food they eat, so they might be more interested in healthy. Party life is pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah, this is looking at the combination of the highest ranking interests and behaviors based off of the geosocial data. And it's combining these two locations and getting an average of those rankings for us. Now, inside of SiteZeus, we can turn these locations on and off to look at them individually as well. Let's look at these top ranking segments, and let's start to have some fun and map them where we're looking at currently today. So for starters, party life. Let's go ahead and map that in this area that we're looking at. And I've already dropped a bolt prior to jumping on this screen share here, because I could tell that there was some really dense conversations happening around this area. So Leiden, can you tell me what this might be showing us here?
Yeah, so it looks like in that area of Philadelphia, 97th percentile, that means that area is higher than 97% of all other block groups for party life activity. And what we just saw from our last customer set is they do well around these customers. So we would imagine that that site would do pretty well, or at least is in proximity to the types of people that resonate with Firehouse subs.
Right. So as everybody knows, customer data is something you absolutely need to take into account when evaluating new markets. We're going to start off by looking at this specific segment. You can tell that there's some good pockets around here, here as well. Green is going to show very high as well. So we want to look at our table over here, our legend, and see what the percentiles are going to look like. So even something in these brighter green areas would be potentially a good site to look at. So let's go back to our dashboard and let's look at some of the other top ranking sites for these two locations. In particular, let's look at ingredient attentive, so food and drink, which again makes a lot of sense for a Firehouse subs concept. And let's go ahead and map this guy out as well. So you can't tell, so let's drill in a little bit further to look at how this location might do if we opened up a location right on the state border with this data set in mind, in particular this segment.
Okay, so as we can see around where this bolt is placed in Philadelphia, we have a fairly high ingredient attentive score here.
Right. Let's look at one other segment, the one that we saw ranking very high for hops and brews for our Allentown location. Let's go ahead and map that out. Now as we're mapping this out, I want to drill in even further just to show how we can really break down this data set in the visualization to see how this area might do with hops and brews. There we go. Now we're really zoomed in. We can really see the conversations happening around this location, in particular for hops and brew at a 63 percentile. So this seems to be a good location to start evaluating actual real estate. So what we can do inside of SiteZeus is drop a pin anywhere on the US map and get a sales projection at this given location, which is a green bolt, which means it's a potential site. So we want to think about opening in this area. We see that at this location, we would be making $862,000. Now, what's really cool about SiteZeus and being able to dive into the data is we can actually open up our variable impact. This will tell us how social segments are impacting this sales forecast. And as you can see, all of these purple icons with segments are showing either positive or negative impact of those conversations happening around that area. Another thing to take into account is that as we're doing this analysis and talking about customer data across markets and how we're evaluating new markets, it's important to know that this data is always impacting the overall model of SiteZeus. So when I drop this projection here, it's taking that data into account already. And on top of that is that we can map out the segments and see where there's high volume interest and behavior around that. So Leiden, thank you so much for joining us today to go over this example and use case of how you can use customer segmentation data through spatial AI inside of SiteZeus tied to mobile location data for expansion analysis.